Toastmaster and fellow Toastmasters. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. Now, I think we've all heard this or some variation on it at some point. And there is an element of truth to it. There is collective good that comes from the widespread disclosure of data, including our own personal data. And there's also an argument that it enhances individual accountability. Most of us behave well most of the time, but most of us behave better if we know we're being watched. So the widespread disclosure of data that has become part of our environment is not completely a bad thing, but it's also not completely a good thing. But let's talk about the good things first. Lots of things that we depend upon every day depend on the availability of large amounts of data. There are crowdsourced applications like the Waze GPS system or for traffic avoidance. It depends on the data points provided by hundreds or thousands of users as they do it. The World Wide Web, something we all use every day, and most of us don't pay for most of the time. Well, how is that paid for? It's paid for by advertising. And those advertisements are very often targeted using the data that we disclose, so that the ads are more valuable both to the advertisers and to us. We have security cameras everywhere, some of them private, some of them public, but they help out. They help reduce crime. And when crimes occur, they help get the right people and exonerate the people that weren't involved. We have disclosure laws that help us trust our politicians and our financial operations and institutions perhaps more than we might otherwise be able to do. But this disclosure involves a certain amount of risk. Now, the risk that it involves very often involves who it's disclosed to. If I disclose a secret to my spouse, it's a very different thing than disclosing it to my employer or Google or the government. But this tracking goes on all the time. What we do on the web is tracked by ISPs, and it's tracked by advertisers, and it's tracked by the websites that we visit. Our cell phones are providing a constant stream of information, both to our providers, to the platform owners, Apple and Google, and to the various apps that use this information or that we authorize it to. Even such things like, how many people in here have a SunPass? Okay, every one of you that has that, and I've got one too, as you drive down the road, you are exposing the information about your movement to the government of the state of Florida. Now, it's a very convenient thing to be able to whiz down a toll road and not stop. But that same information can be abused. If it discloses, for example, that you got from Orlando to Tampa in 40 minutes, and driving the speed limit, it takes you 60, guess what? Somewhere along the way, you sped. Now, Florida has a legal firewall protecting the SunPass information from that form of use in most cases. You have to get a warrant to go after SunPass data. Law enforcement can't go fish in the SunPass database and say, aha, I can send out 47,822 speeding tickets today. But it involves a certain amount of trust into who you disclose it to. Even that trust, though, has risks, because the data that we disclose, it's bits and pieces. It's the responsibility of people who look at that data to put it together correctly and to use it in valid ways. And when they don't, bad things can happen. Sometimes, even when they do. Businesses, for example, can use this data to behave in ways that are unfriendly to you. They can detect whether or not you are likely to pay a higher price for something than your neighbor is, and show that price to you, show that higher price to you on a website. Credit reports are used for all kinds of things having nothing to do with credit, job decisions, entry into a community, all kinds of things. And those credit reports, oh, they're always accurate, aren't they? No. Criminals can get this data. They can use it to target you as a potential victim, or they can just make money off your profile by selling it to somebody else. And even our governments and other governments can occasionally get bad data and make bad decisions based on it, restricting everything from your travel to your life. So it's hard in the current environment to protect your privacy, but it is not impossible. There are things you can do to reduce the data flow you have. Turn off the GPS on your phone if you're not using it. It will also extend the battery life. If you have a SunPass, it may have come with a little silver static bag, and if you didn't, you can get one at any electronics store. Stick it in there when you're not using it so that it can't communicate with the base stations. Make use of VPNs and things like Tor if you're surfing the web in a way you don't necessarily want used. When you give out an email address, there are several disposable email address services you can use so that you can control that a little bit better. I use one called Spam Gourmet, and it's wonderful. Also happens to be free. Understand, though, that determined people will be able to break through your privacy. It's like locking your door. There's only so much you can do to secure your door so that somebody won't break through, but what you can do is make it harder so they go somewhere else. And the same principle applies when protecting your privacy. But there's a balance to be had here, because every time you go over here and behave in a way that looks like you're keeping secrets, people are going to look at you that much harder. So you want to be selective as you use these tactics. You want to be public where it's appropriate, private where it's appropriate. But when you give up your data, you're giving up something of value. Make sure you get something for it. When you give up your data to Google, you can get a lot from them for that, and they provide something of a balance. But you have to determine for yourself where that balance is, and it's not a decision you make once, because it's going to vary day to day, data to data, and provider to provider. When someone asks you to give up your data, understand why. Ask the question, why do you need this information? It's for our records is not an acceptable answer. Have a valid reason. Stay flexible, stay up to date, because this is a landscape that is constantly changing. Your circumstances will change, your data changes, and how it gets used changes. So this is not a do once decision. It's a balance you have to do every day, every decision. This is why you're balancing on air. Mr. Toastmaster.